Welcome back. According to the FBI's UCR, their Uniform Crime Report, crime in Racine hit an all-time low in 2016. All-time meaning since the FBI started recording data that way back in 1965. The Racine Police Department, of course, plays a big role in this, so I would like to welcome Art Howell onto the program. Art is the chief of Racine Police, as well as Dr. Eric Gallion. He's the deputy superintendent for Racine Unified School District. Thank you both for being on the program.
Thank you for having us.
And just a quick touch on the UCR. Chief, what would you attribute to that being an all-time low?
Well, first of all, our people. We have phenomenal officers and investigators, and our community. We have partners, Crime Stoppers, Neighborhood Watch. We have a coalition against human trafficking. We have so many partners that really want to make sure that we have the best resources. We have great community partners who finance some of our community policing homes, and so we're just grateful with the support that we get as officers.
And talking about community partners, introduce me to this gentleman right here and talk to me about how you work together.
Sure, Mr. Eric Gallion, Deputy Superintendent, soon to be actual superintendent of the Racine Unified School District. He and I problem solve on a regular basis since he's been in town. And we started talking, there's sensitive information that happens at the school level that police officers wouldn't have access to. And then there's sensitive police data that school administrators wouldn't have access to. And we started talking if we could build a partnership so that we could network and cross the lines of authority where appropriate, we could make the school safer for everyone.
Dr. Gallion, what's the benefit of a partnership from your perspective?
Well, I could tell you, I've been in Racine for about 4 years now. And one of the things I noticed right away in the community is that there is an excellent community policing model there. They're a part of the community. They are a resource to the community. And I began to talk to Chief about 3 years ago about what would it look like if we brought that model into the school. And this last year we had an opportunity to do it, and we took advantage of it.
Yeah. So what does this partnership look like? You know, how does it actually affect the kids? I mean, we can say like, hey, working together, this is great, this and that, but you know, when your kid is in trouble or you want to prevent the child from getting in trouble, you know, what does that actually look like?
So let's start with the basic community policing model. And, you know, under Chief Richard Polzing back in 1992 when he was appointed, he put police officers at the neighborhood level so that they could develop a rapport with some of the neighbors. And so that way we could define who the bad guys were and who the neighbors were who were supporting us. Same way in schools. We put an officer in the school system. There's over 20,000 kids in the district, and the overwhelming majority of them are not in trouble. They're not truant, they're not causing problems, but unfortunately, if the officers aren't there on a daily basis, they wouldn't know where the problems are. And so by virtue of implanting an officer at the school level, we can put our finger on the pulse of what's going on there every day.
This is something that I hear very commonly, whether it's a city council meeting or I'm doing man on the street interviews as my job as a reporter with CBS 58. People say, you know, kids today, they don't respect police. Or, you know, even more likely, you know, young African Americans don't respect police. You know, from the level of the school, is that true? And, you know, just what are your perspectives on that?
So, phenomenal question. So we were just having a conversation today about that. It's a different level of respect, right? So when I grew up, we didn't raise our voices to adults. We didn't use foul language. We didn't do those things. And so from our vantage point, from our culture, from our generation, we think these kids are disrespectful. But what we learn is when you develop a relationship and rapport with the young people, it's a completely different platform. So things are different in terms of how to interact with this generation, but we think there is a measure of respect. We know kids that we do have rapport with and that do respect authority, and so it's just a matter of bridging the gap between the generations.
How do you feel about that?
Exactly. I think that Chief hit it right on the head. The relationship is the big piece of how things need to get done between adults and students these days. Back in 1970, your respect for adults wasn't contingent upon relationships. It was contingent upon the role. And now students want to feel like the adults connect with them and they understand who they are and they have a voice. And so most of our students comply, and that's not a challenge. They understand the roles. But in cases where those opportunities for friction occur, the relationship is what keeps that from happening.
Yes, yes.
And that's the uniqueness of this partnership. These officers are in the schools. They're not there as enforcers. They're there to build relationships and take a proactive measure.
And I want to ask you both as well. Another thing I do when I do stories, I post them on Facebook, and the comments I see immediately, you know, if a 16-year-old has gotten in trouble, people are very judgmental. They want to, you know, basically send them to the electric chair immediately. But I believe, if I could share a personal opinion, that, you know, young people, their brains are not fully developed, and they're, you know, apt to make poor decisions. And can we be so quick to judge? Do you feel like this intervention kind of helps in a way to facilitate, you know, even keeping kids out of those positions?
So two-part answers. The first part is we actually send our officers to school to learn to, it's a school in particular called Policing the Teen Brain. You're absolutely right. We're trained that a kid's brain isn't developed until they're 20 or plus. And so our officers need to understand that the young people are not quite fully developed in some cases, and so that's not to say that they don't understand right and wrong. That just says some more maturity to come, and so definitely that's a part of it. And so, and then the second part is we just, again, going back to the relationships, if we can break down barriers and through relationships, that's where we're going to
Well,
be
Chief,
successful.
thank you very much. Dr. Gallion, thank you very much.
Thank
We're
you.
going to be back with Chief Howell here and one other guest, so stay tuned for that. How about a little follow-up from our last show? You saw me hand off this Peeps self-portrait to the folks over at the Racine Art Museum for their 8th Annual International Peeps Art Exhibition. Well, on Wednesday, they had their presentation for the awards. I did not win. But isn't participating in an event like this winning in some way? In this reporter's opinion, no. Welcome back to the show. Again, I'm joined by Racine Police Chief Art Howell. And let me get that name right. So I said Arthur Howell at the beginning, but it is not Arthur. It is what?
It's Arthel, and my mom would be happy that you corrected it. It's
I'm
Arthel.
sorry. I don't want to tick off Mom. And then we also have Lieutenant William Maceman here, and we're going to be talking a little bit about the history exhibit that you're setting up. What can you tell me about it? What is this?
We discovered a few years ago that we actually have a pretty rich history at the Racine Police Department that was mostly unknown from officers, public, and all, because when we moved to our current building in the 60s, most of that stuff was lost. It just nowhere to store it, things like that. Well, a few years ago, we started rebuilding our collection, learning more about it. We had a small display in our lobby, but it really didn't do our history justice. So the chief asked us to put together a committee.
Okay.
We put together a committee to do a little research on history and design a proper museum level display for our front lobby for the public, and that's what we've done.
Great. And this is an example of something that would be in that exhibit, correct?
Exactly.
What is this here? What is this?
Well, this is one of our artifacts that we found that we actually have in the display now. This is an old polygraph machine, or a lie detector most people know it as.
Wow. Wow.
It's not used now. Oh, thank you, Chief. It's not used now, but this was something that scientifically you would hook somebody up, and it helped test for biological changes or physiological changes when somebody was asked a question to try to determine if they're lying or not.
And this is a piece of history because it's not really used now, right? Or tell me the history about this machine. Who would have used it and when did it go out of use?
Well, we had a captain that was certified by the federal government to use this, and we used it on people we interviewed, suspects. But what kind of makes it more history for the officers is this was actually part of our hiring process. When officers were going through the process, they would have to take this test to show that they were honest and their answers to the interview questions were proper. And the chief and I both, through our process to be hired, actually were tested on this exact machine.
What do you remember about that?
I remember being extremely scared.
Yes.
And I thought to myself, today's not the day to be dishonest.
Well, tell me, when is this going to be opening, or how much longer until people get to come in and see all these artifacts?
It's almost all set to go. Our displays are in place right now. We're just kind of doing the final labeling and such like that, but we're hoping to have a dedication ceremony for the public to officially open it sometime in early May.
Give me a little taste of what else might be in the exhibit. Are we talking old badges, uniforms, guns? What are we talking about?
Currently we've got different displays in there, including uniforming, photographs. We've got one section dedicated just to our canine program through history. We don't have any firearms. We don't plan on doing that for safety aspects. We do have some kind of weaponry as far as batons, things like that. Just a real sampling of different portions of the department's history.
And Chief, just quickly as we wrap up, when you look at the old stuff, what do you think about, being chief there now?
It's amazing how far we've come through with technology. And we also have a wall honoring those members of our department who lost their lives in the line of duty. So it's just a great way for us to pay tribute to those who worked before us.
Well, sounds like a great visit. Thank you both for coming on the program, and hopefully we'll have you back at some point. I'm going to stop by and see all this stuff for sure. Thank you so much. Up next, a visit from the people at the Racine Zoo. It's getting close to Easter, so see if you can guess which animal they're bringing in for us. We'll be back right after these messages.